Okay, this is starting to simmer. It hasn't quite boiled, but it also shows why you should always cut your butter, right? Because if you put it in whole, if you put like a whole chunk of butter, what's going to happen is the liquid might boil first before the butter melts, and that's not a good thing at all. So when it's diced, it's going to come to a boil, the butter's going to melt, and that's what we're looking for, okay? The next thing is this is going to come to a rolling boil, right? Right now it's boiling, but you go a little bit further. You can see how it's starting to go up on the pot. Okay, another reason why I'm using a deeper than absolutely necessary pot. I would argue that it's absolutely necessary to have this deep of a pot, but you can see that that is a rolling boil to me. Okay, so we're going to get off the stove now. Have the flour here, and we're going to drop it all in one shot. Okay, I initially did it very carefully. Even then, I got some off. So we want to make sure that once we have it under control, that we stir vigorously. Okay, so now we're going to take our rubber spatula, get everything out of the whisk. Okay, a quick cleanup before we keep going. So we're gonna go back on the stove top, and we're gonna go on medium heat. Okay, don't go too high either. We're gonna go on medium heat, and we're gonna have a thermometer close by to monitor pre-gelatinization temperature. Okay, so turn this on to medium. Back on the stove. So we're stirring. You can see at this point it's formed a pretty even paste, like mashed potatoes almost. We want to keep going here until we've actually pre-gelatinized all the flour. So there's a reason why I'm stirring vigorously as well, because I want to make sure that all the flour pre-gelatinizes, not just what is in contact with the bottom of the pot. Whatever's in the bottom of the pot is going to get hot faster, obviously. So as I stir, I'm making sure that that temperature is evenly distributed throughout. So we're going to do a quick temperature check. So initially, I was talking in Fahrenheit, now we're talking in Celsius. So what we're looking at is between 74 and 80 degrees Celsius. So we're at 74, maybe cooling down a bit. Going to go a little bit more. That window is a pretty good window to cook our, pre-gelatinize our starch too, okay? You've also probably been told, you know, look for a film forming at the bottom of the pot. I mean, that's okay, but again, that's also for me like reading tea leaves. It's like sorcery. It doesn't mean very much. An accurate temperature is going to be a lot more helpful than, you know, trying to read what the bottom of the pot is trying to tell you, okay? It's not a Ouija board. So, do it one more time. Okay. When you measure your temperature, make sure that it's in the center of the mass, not touching the bottom of the pot, because obviously it's going to be hotter there. So we're at 76 degrees here, Celsius. So we're going to get off the pot, and now we're going to go into our mixer bowl. Okay, so we have our mixer set up ready. I'm going to put all of my pre-gelatinized paste in the bowl. And we're going to start mixing this with the paddle attachment to cool it down, okay? It's a very small amount, so it's going to go pretty quickly. I have this to measure the surface temperature. Works better when you plug the mixer. Low, medium, low speed. You can see all of this steam coming off. I just pulled my eggs out of the fridge so they're nice and cold. So once this drops to a pretty cool temperature, it doesn't have to be room temperature, but cool enough to not cook the eggs, we're going to be ready to start adding them. When we add the eggs, we're going to add them in 3 to 4 additions. I do this even with larger batches, in which I I have a bigger mixer bowl and a larger quantity, I will still do 3 to 4 additions. You don't need to do more than that. After the first and second addition of eggs, you don't need to scrape the bowl or the paddle, but after the third and the fourth, I always like to scrape the bowl and the paddle to make sure I have a smooth, homogeneous mix, okay? So, we're looking for a temperature here that is below what eggs would cook at. So, eggs start to cook at 45 degrees Celsius, which is about 89, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So, we want to make sure that we're adding the eggs once this is cooler than that temperature. My rubber spatula ready because we're going to be using this after we are incorporating the eggs, and you only add more eggs once the previous amount has already been completely incorporated into your base. Okay. If you don't have one of these, just use a probe thermometer and that'll work too. Okay, we're at 44 degrees Celsius, so I'm going to add a quarter of the eggs. I'll turn this down a little bit. Once that's been incorporated, then I'm going to add another quarter. So after this addition, I'm going to stir the bowl and the paddle as well. Okay, so drop it, scrape the bowl, the sides, get in there well as you can, bottom too. Again, this is a small batch, so this should theoretically be easier to do than when you do large quantities, but the method is exactly the same. And we're also scraping the paddle, particularly the closer to the top. Sometimes this batter likes to climb to the top, so we need to make sure that it's getting scraped so we don't have any lumps in our patachoux. Okay. Those lumps are sometimes what are responsible for making those blowouts in your patachoux. If you've ever had a blowout or a seam rip, or it just loses its shape while it's baking, sometimes it's these lumps. Okay. We're going to add our last amount of egg. Get everything out. Trying to determine if that is enough egg or not. It seems like it is, because I'm going to show you in a second. I'm going to first, one more time, scrape the bowl. And the paddle. And we're going to give it one last mix for a few seconds. And then I'll show you what the final batter looks like. And to determine whether you need to add more eggs or not. Typically, when you follow the recipe as it is, when you pre-gelatinize to the temperature that I told you to, you have the same amount of evaporation every time, therefore you need the same amount of eggs. So there's no guesswork in that. I think we're good to go. And I'm going to show you what I'm looking at, which is a smooth and shiny batter. Okay, so I'm trying to show you what I'm looking at here, which is a shiny, smooth paste that if I stir it, it puddles just for like a second and it stops. So it's shiny and it's thick enough to be piped right now. perhaps this will show it better. This is a view from above, so I'm stirring it. It's got a little bit of that shine, and when it puddles, it's just slowly settling, but then it stops. So, okay, looks like we're good to go. Okay, we're gonna pipe our pot au choux. So I use this, it's just a bench scraper, bowl scraper, which is just the right length. It's about 6 inches. So I just move it along. This is a sheet pan, it's a black steel pan, but you can use a regular sheet pan. Just make sure that you line it with silpat or put parchment paper and just stick it down really well. So I'm gonna pipe straight down. When you reach the end, you stop squeezing the bag and you just pull back and then forward. Okay, so you're trying to basically cut it as cleanly as possible. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Same thing. And we stop, pull back, and then forward. This one got a little air pocket in there, but that's okay. I can easily fix that. I'm going to try 2 different things. I wanted to show you just the difference between, applying cooking oil and powdered sugar. So for half of these, we're going to use cooking oil. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically spray them on the surface, making sure it gets everywhere. And then for the other half, we're going to use powdered sugar. Okay. And so the idea behind doing all this is that what you have is basically a layer that protects the surface of the pot au choux, and what it does is it allows it to expand without the pot au choux cracking or breaking on you. Okay, so sugar helps do that, so does the spray oil. Okay, so we're doing the 2 different ones so you can see the difference between both methods, and then you can choose whichever one you prefer. I like using both. Some people will also use the Migoya powder from cocoa berry. You see these tips here? You can always go back just with the fingertip and kind of smooth it out and flatten it. Okay. This was my first one. It didn't come out so great, but we're not gonna throw it away. This one was kind of like the tester. It went too skinny on me, and it's got a couple of bubbles, but we're gonna bake it anyway, see how it turns out. But these other ones were pretty good, how they were piped, pretty even. And that's important, right? Because the way they are piped is the way they're going to bake. So if you have a peanut shape, it's gonna bake like a peanut. If you have an exclamation point shape, it's gonna bake like an exclamation point. So if you start with a nice, smooth, even surface, then that's how they're basically going to bake. Okay, so these are going in a 300. So the eclairs on the left were coated in sugar, and the eclairs on the right with oil. The ones with sugar you can see are a little bit darker because of the sugar, caramelized more. But the ones with the oil gave us a little bit more volume. They're a little bit bigger. They were piped to the same length, and notice how they're a little bit longer. But also you can see the volume. If we get down here, the eclairs with the oil are a little bit bigger in volume too. So I'm going to stick with oil. It just seems to be a better option. It's also easier to clean the pan. The setup we have. This is the setup we have. It's the baking steel and our sheet pan with the eclairs. So this turned out pretty well. I mean, you can see how even it is. Evenly baked too. It's pretty good size. I mean, this is about 6 inches. So it turned out pretty well. And keep in mind, this was baked in a home oven. So it's pretty good. So we're going to fill the eclairs today, and I kept these in the freezer for a couple days. So what I did is I just threw them in the oven for a little bit to refresh them, and then we're going to take. You can take like a thermometer tip, like the probe tip, or a piping tip that is very small, like this one. In fact, I'm going to use this one not just for the holes, but also to fill them, because it's long enough and it has a narrow enough tip. You can see there. So we're going to make 3 perforations. See there, we'll do it in 3 different areas. Okay, we're going to do these for all 3, and basically what I do is I'll fill one, I'll start filling here, and because this is hollow inside, it basically will push through and it'll come out on this side. So this way I know I have enough on this side, and then I'll just put my tip back in here and pipe, and then when it comes out even more on here, I know that I've completely filled the eclair. So, you know, you should make sure that there's enough in here that it feels heavier than it looks. That's how you know it's completely full. All right, we're gonna fill our eclairs. I wanna show you the setup I have. The tip, I tape it here because every time you kind of shove this into the eclair, it kind of tends to go back and sink back into the bag. So this keeps you in place. And also a rubber band here. So we're going to start piping from one end, and when we see it come out towards the middle here, then we go on the other side. See, and when you see it extruding on this side, it means it's done. Okay, so it's filled, it's heavy, ready to go. All right, we're gonna coat our eclairs with caramelized sugar. So I cooked sugar pretty dark. I like it because this way it's not as sweet, but it also looks better. So it's a nice flavor contrast. It's almost like gonna give you like a creme brulee feeling when you bite into it, and then you have the creamy custard interior. So what I'm gonna do is, so I don't put my fingers in here. I cooked the sugar, I cooled it down in a water bath, just so that it would stop cooking. But then I'm gonna take a pair of tweezers, and I'm going to basically dip it in the sugar, just as I would if I was glazing it with regular glaze. And then we're just going to bring it up and let the excess drip. Okay. So I decided to do it like this because I do it with cream puffs, and they're so delicious like that. When you have a croquembouche, if you think about like textural contrast and the flavor contrast, and the fact that it is in fact not as sweet. I like fondant, don't get me wrong, fondant is fine. So many people have beef with fondant, but for me, I kind of like it, so it's not a huge problem for me. But I wanted to try this out with eclairs and see how it turned out, because why not? Why wouldn't it work with eclairs? So see how beautiful and shiny it is, and it's gonna stay shiny. I mean, it's not gonna go dull at any point. I mean, if it's very humid out, it probably will, but you can get a really straight line with the caramel and a very shiny glaze and a beautiful eclair. Okay. So we're just gonna let these set here where we had them, and you just can't keep going. If your sugar gets too hard, just rewarm it. If you need to cool it down, and just keep going like that. Okay. I'm gonna show you a quick and easy way to glaze eclairs. So these eclairs, these are already filled. These are a little smaller. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip them in. This is a pistachio shell, and these are toasted pistachios. That's all. So go in, let it drip a little bit, and then we just coat them with the pistachios. Just make sure they really get on there. And there it is, just completely covered with toasted pistachios. So it's a thing of beauty. We're gonna put a cherry on top of these. It's a huge indulgence to be able to eat this eclair, but it's one of the best eclairs I've had. I mean, you can hear the crunch of the sugar. It's a thin enough layer that it doesn't stick to your teeth. It's really good.